Yeah, the craziest steroid story I ever saw was uh, there was a guy, and I'm not gonna say his name, but he was the prototype of a bodybuilder on steroids. Becoming a wrestler, and he tells me, come over to his place one night, and we'll have dinner. And he ate like six large steaks, and then he gassed up. And after he did the juice, he took out a needle full of insulin. And I said to him, I said, "Are you a diabetic?" And he said, "No, brother. I take this to tighten the muscles. I get more definition if I inject insulin after juicing up." And I said, "Well, what happens if you put too much of it in there?" And he said, "Oh, well, I could die, so I got to be careful." Yeah, that was the way those guys were. That's how they were. Yeah, I took some steroids. I only took them a few times. I'm not gonna sit here and lie about it. Uh, Actually, the video you're mentioning, no, that was not steroids at all. That was 42 or 43 days of working out every single day, twice a day, and taking supplements and things of that nature. That was not steroids. But I'll say this much: the first time that I tried steroids, well, the way in which I got my hands on them, that's an incredible story. Uh, they used to issue on a state by state basis licenses. You had to be licensed to be a professional wrestler or a professional boxer. Some of the states had the same. New York used to have a license that said you're licensed as a wrestler and a boxer. But I was under 18 years old, and Frank Iadevaia and I went to the New Jersey State Athletic Commission, and I had a fake ID that said I was from Kentucky or someplace like that, or Tennessee, that I bought for $15 in Times Square. And I went to the Jersey State Athletic Commission with Frank, and we signed up for licenses as wrestlers, and that was the way it worked back then. You could get away with things like that, and that was the first time that I was ever given steroids. I'm trying to remember. I know one of them were Winstrol, and I think the other one may have been Decadervin. But I was, a minor, and the doctor from the State Athletic Commission who took our EKG and our, made sure we had a pulse, right? He went into a little cabinet and gave us the juice. He gave it to each of us individually. So I had to go out of the country not too long after this. It was just a couple days, and I took uh, the the gimmick with me, and was on a plane. I took it right before I got on a plane, and on the plane on the way over, I got up and went to the bathroom, and I urinated blood. And then the next night or two in Europe, I started to lose my hair. It was thinning out. I'd wake up in the morning and my hair would be missing. And I remember peeing blood for about a month on and off. And that was my first experience with the gas. So, I mean, you'd be crazy to try and take that stuff these days. Uh, I'm not going to say like we didn't know that you could have these repercussions, because we did. We knew that some people, Billy Graham, David San Martino, and them became very sick using the gas. We were very young. I mean, I wasn't even old enough to vote. And that's the way that it was. Uh, I can't remember the other few occasions when I used the juice, but I do remember that it was bad. There were bad side effects, and some people, myself included, just aren't meant to use that stuff. But it's poison for your body, and it was a foolish thing that I did when I was young, and I'm still feeling some of the effects of it to this day. And the thing is that it didn't do too much for me. Kind of made my skin really leathery, uh, but disastrous stuff. Disastrous stuff in my case. So, what, Frank Iadevaia stories? Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's a lot of Frank Iadevaia stories. Yeah, we could tell a couple of those. Well, I was his original partner in doing shows. We did the shows under the banner Fab Promotions, Frank and Ben. It was the NSWA, the Northern States Wrestling Alliance. And Frank had an incredible creative mind for the wrestling business, and he had a real eye for talent. I just really ran the dressing room and did the advertising for the shows. It was a very different business back then. Uh, we were using a converted boxing ring, and but a lot of guys really liked working those shows. And you had Big Dick and Devon Dudley worked. There's a great story with them. It was Frank would do up flyers and give them to me, and Big Dick Dudley was doing a gimmick. I thought it was better than the Dudley gimmick that he did, called Alexander the Great. He'd come running to the ring with a giant sword like the Berserker, and he played the Roman Emperor. The thing is he when he debuted for us, he ran out through the curtain, which had these beads hanging down in front of it, and he held his sword at an angle to get it through the curtain way, and he cut all the beads down as he came to the ring. And man, Big Dick Alex Rizzo could really work. But the funny thing is Alex, his gimmick was Alexander the Great, and Devon Dudley was working as the A Train, which was the subway line around where he had lived in Brooklyn. So Frank did up these flyers, and it said main event, Alex the Great, not Alexander the Great, versus a train. And I remember that both of those guys were a little upset about that. And I remember Dick Dudley saying to Frank, hey, Frank, you're putting me in the ring with a train tonight? I thought that was great. Actually, another funny story from those shows was Frank had come up with a whole bunch of locker room rules for the boys, and he tells me, would you type it up? And it was stuff like, no talking in the background while other guys are cutting their promos, no, smoking in the dressing room, things like that of that nature. So I type up all these rules, and a lot of guys would come work those shows. I remember we had like 50, 60 guys show up just because there's so few places to work at the time. It was just so hard to get booked anywhere because nobody was running shows of any type. And I print up the original of these rules, and I bring them to Frank, and he runs off like 100 copies of them for everybody involved in the show. Everyone from the sound guy to the ring announcer to the boys to the everyone, their girlfriends, all of that stuff. But he put at the bottom of the rules as the final rule, no sucking each other's dicks, this means you. And then he put someone's name down there who I won't mention today, and he handed out these flyers, and everyone just turned their head and looked at the guy. Yeah, he was a character. One of the memories I have of those early NSWA shows was the referee decided to go into business for himself one night and turn himself into a heel wrestler. Without telling anyone about it, he raised the hand of the guy that won the match and gave him a short clothesline. And we were out a referee. So Frank had these two guys called Disco Don and the Disco Duck. And Disco Don had an all-white suit like Glenn Gilbretti, the Disco Inferno. Now, mind you, this is before Disco Inferno was doing the gimmick. I mean, this is substantially before I had ever seen the Disco Inferno. So he sends Disco Don and the Disco Duck, who's in a duck suit, to the ring to referee a match to replace this rogue referee who went into business for himself. that is just some sight to see these guys standing in the ring, and this guy's in a duck suit, the other guy's in a disco suit, and they're reffing the next match that went out. Frank was truly a wild man, to say the least. I recall Frank's girlfriend once. I was in the back seat of her car. Frank was up front. And this woman drove us from someplace in Pennsylvania to Jersey City, New Jersey, in what felt like 35-40 minutes flat, because she was doing 130 miles an hour down the Jersey highways. 130 miles per hour. It still is nerve-wracking to think about it. The craziest story ever on Frank Iadevaia. Well, yeah, a few people thought that Frank may have had syphilis and it was rotting his brain. I'm serious. This is how wild Frank behaved. The thing that sticks out the most, and I really don't know if I should discuss this, but I mean, it's not for kids, so I will discuss it. But Frank calls me up one night, and he says, hey, what are you doing tonight? And he kind of whispers into the phone. He says, and he's calling me from a payphone somewhere. He says, listen, put some cologne on and come meet me outside your house in 10 minutes. I got these two girls, and they're a bunch of ring rats, and this one girl's really into you and the other one's into me, so just come on out. So I go out, and we go out to New Jersey, and we have dinner, and it was a good date. The girls were really digging us, and we went back to the house where Frank lived, the apartment where he lived with his mother, and she was away. And we sit down on these two little love seats that they had in there, and this place was tiny. I mean, this place was so small that you'd have to step out onto the street to change your mind. It was a tiny apartment, but we're crammed in there, and the girls start making moves on us. And Frank had ate a salad or something like that, probably the only healthy thing that he had had in ages. And all of a sudden he starts breaking wind, like one after another, boom, 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 on the sofa. And he turns to the girls and goes, "That's what happens when you feed me a salad. Hold on." And he jumps into the bathroom. And yeah, classy, right? Well, he's in there, and he's in there for a while, and he's making all this noise, all this ruckus, and no, Chicago is, yeah, that way. So he's making all this noise, all this ruckus. sitting there with this beautiful girl, and his girl is equally as beautiful, and Frank runs out of the bathroom, and on his arm, on the forearm, is the crap that he just took, and he goes, "Holy God, isn't this the biggest shit you've ever seen in your life?" And the girls just got up, didn't even say a word. They ran out the door, and Frank is there like, "Holy God, man. Look at the size of this thing. This is the biggest shit I ever took in my life." He was out of his mind. But, if you have to analyze Frank Iadevaia, you want to start, with his experiences and growing up and his family. I used to go and meet Frank after work in Journal Square in New Jersey. He had a job near there for a company. I won't say the name. He worked in the mailroom. His sister was a big executive. And, the stuff Frank did, if you did anything even approaching that today, they'd probably put you to the electric chair. But at the time, Frank got away with a lot of this stuff. And I wonder how he even did it back then, because he was one of the wildest people to ever come out of the wrestling business. But I used to meet him in Journal Square, and he worked for that company nearby in the mailroom. His sister was the executive. There were 83 complaints of sexual harassment one year, and 81 of them were Frank's, and all he got was a letter about it. But I'd meet him there after work, and a few times he would stand on the street, and they were building this city jail. This is in Jersey City. And for some reason, they had like one welder was responsible for welding every single jail cell door. And the man would do it, on this outside. The building hadn't been completed yet. So you could see him welding these jail cells. And a few times I walked up to Frank, and Frank was just staring at the cells and would say, "That's where I'm going to wind up one day. That's how it's going to end for me." And he would relate this story that his father was a con man and a gypsy and all this stuff, and his dying words to Frank were, "Why work when you can steal?" No. Listen, whatever the heat was, I can't even remember right now what it was about. I mean, that's pre 9/11, but I'll say this much is right before he passed away, there was a man, I want to say he was out of Maryland somewhere, but he was trying to get myself and Frank back together. And I got a phone call one night, and I pick up the phone, and it's a Jersey number, South Jersey number, and it's Frank. He goes, "Holy God, Ben, you're still alive!" And and the man was trying to get us to meet up again and reconnect, and he got my number and Frank's number, and Frank gave me a call, and I was on the phone with Frank for about I don't know, a few seconds, and he said, "Holy God, Ben, you're still alive. Hey man, um, I want to see you someplace, and I'm driving now." And then the phone cut off, and he died 2 or 3 days later. I remember hearing about it. He just died a couple days later, and we were going to meet up again after all those years. I don't even remember what it was over. I have no animosity uh, uh, toward Frank. Look, we got into that business together when um, we were very young. I was younger even than Frank, and we were both scared to death, in that business, and so I don't even remember what it was. I could rack my brain, but the thing I will say this, that I found it to be very disturbing, that Frank had a son with a dark-skinned woman, and I did not like the fact that when I knew him, he had abandoned the kid. That never really sat well with me. I could tell you an interesting story from the spectrum of human nature and human interaction. So Frank lived with his mother, and they were Italian. And one night I was staying there, and Frank's son, from the dark-skinned woman, and he was a dark-skinned boy too. Uh, the kid's only about 5 years old, maybe. I really don't remember, and but he was not that much older than 5 or 6 at the most. But him and Frank and I would go over to the mother's apartment, and it's getting kind of late, and the mother says, "Hey, I have this DVD, or it was a VHS tape. These VHS tapes of A Bronx Tale, the Chaz Palminteri movie about the Italian gangsters and all that stuff." So, we sit around watching this, and we're getting ready to go to bed, and the son is sitting there, and they have these scenes in the movie that touch on like racial tension, and the mother and Frank, in front of Frank's son, who is part African American, start going, "The nigger's this, the nigger's that. That's what happens, to niggers when they run into Italians," and things like this. And I'm sitting there, and I'm getting offended. I don't have a racist bone in my body. And then furthermore, I just was horrified, mortified that they're doing this in front of this child. So I'm thinking about what I can, say to get them to calm down, and get them to think about what they're doing. And I said, well, it's so ridiculous that Italians feel that way about black people, because Italians actually come from Africa. They came to Europe as for the gypsy trades. They came from Africa, and Frank's mother threw me out of the house on the spot. She said, "Get the hell out of my house! Get up and go." And she threw me out of the house. There's a whole raft of Frank Iadevaia stories, definitely. Yeah, the craziest steroid story I ever saw was there was a guy, and I'm not going to say his name, but he was the prototype of a bodybuilder on steroids, becoming a wrestler, and he tells me, come over to his place one night, and we'll have dinner. And he ate like 6 large steaks, and then he gassed up. And after he did the juice, he took out a needle full of insulin. And I said to him, are you a diabetic? And he said, no, brother, I take this to, tighten the muscles. I get more definition if I inject insulin after juicing up. And I said, well, what happens if you put too much of it in there? And he said, oh, well, I could die, so I got to be careful. Yeah, that was the way those guys were. That's how they were. When excuse me, when Brian Pillman he crashed the Humvee out there in where was it? Southern Ohio, I think. Everybody in the business thought that it was a work, that Pillman was working everyone. So I'm sitting there with Frank, and I get a phone call. It was somebody up in Connecticut working for McMahon, and they had known Pillman. I don't think he was working for the company at the time, but everyone was trying to figure out if it was a work or not, and nobody wanted to call over to the hospital to see if indeed he was really in this car accident. They didn't want to get worked, so I called over to the hospital, and Frank is on the line with me, and Pillman answers the phone, and Frank is telling him, man, that's the sickest bump you've ever took in your life. And Pillman's going, and then Frank starts saying, now every backdrop you do, you're going to have to scrape the ceiling with your nose. So Pillman starts laughing. And then Doctor grabs the phone. Who is this? What the hell are you doing? This man has his jaw wired shut. He's in critical condition. And don't call back here. All this. So you're able to determine that the Humvee accident was real. But Frank pushed him into those reactions and stuff. While I guess he was, on the in recovery with his jaw wired shut. I remember when Osamu Nishimura, a Japanese wrestler, was sent on a training program by whatever company he worked for in Japan. I think he worked for New Japan Pro Wrestling. And he was sent here to get himself booked and own his craft on U.S. independence. The problem was that there were just not enough, independent promotions for anyone to really get much work. So we are in the Lower East Side wrestling gym in New York, Frank and myself. And Frank had come over to meet us, and Jason Knight was just about getting ready to go work for ECW, and he had been putting together a series of these videos for ECW, really good stuff, where he's on a bicycle in a basement, and he's doing his gimmick, what will become his gimmick, the sexiest man on earth, and all this stuff with the suit with no shirt. So we're down there, and Jason says to myself and Frank, what can we do? Can we film some promos? So we get into a promo, and Frank starts getting dressed, puts on, I think, a pink and purple boa, a bandana, and sunglasses, and he's telling me, he's going, I just watched Takada, UWFI, the shoot wrestling from Japan, right? And he said, I want to do that gimmick. He goes, I want to do a gimmick where I'm the shooter. I'm going to be the shooter, and I'm going to throw a guy in an armbar like Takada, and that's going to be my gimmick. And instantly I'm telling him, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You're going to get yourself killed or maimed. You're going to try that with somebody who's going to take you apart, right? But Frank was, I guess he was just excited about watching Takada, kick the crap out of someone, in Japan, even if it was a work, right? So we go out to the ring and we're doing this promo with Jason, and Frank starts saying, "You know what, Jason? I'm 21. I'm the young gun. And I'm ready to shoot. And if you don't move out of my way, I'm going to fire on you." And Osamu Nishimura is sitting there next to the ring. And I'm watching his eyes get wide. And just the look on his face, because I don't think he really understood what was going on. He just heard, "I'm gonna shoot." So we finished the promo. I think Jason hit Frank with a chair, DDT'd me, walks out, of the ring. And we're done. So now we say, "Hey, let's have a workout." And Nishimura gets in the ring with Frank, and Frank, before they tie up, starts saying, "Listen, I got this new gimmick I want to work on. I'm going to be the shooter." And Nishimura's like, "What? Uh-huh." He didn't really get it. He goes, "Yeah, I'm going to shoot." And Nishimura's going, "You shoot? You shoot." Frank's like, "Yeah, the shooter. I'm a shooter." And he starts stomping his foot on the side near the ropes like Duggan, and he's going, "Takara, Takara, Takara," and Nishimura's just looking at him. He ties up with Frank, and Frank starts putting the boots to him, and Nishimura is getting really perturbed, and then Frank tries, in a very poor attempt, to throw Takada's leg and arm bar on Nishimura, who slides right out of it and lifted Frank up by his arms and his wrists and gave him a bunch of kicks to the chest, to the stomach, and straight out flattened him, laid him back. And Nishimura's going, "Shooter, shooter," and I get on the ring apron, and I'm trying to explain to Nishimura, he doesn't mean it. He's crazy. Well, when I get up on the ring apron, all of a sudden my feet leave the ground, and Nishimura pulled me into the ring and threw me in the corner, and he just gave me this look like, now I'm under attack by two guys, and he beat the hell out of both of us that day. And then it was explained to him later on, what exactly had occurred. And we wound up taking Osamu Nishimura to the place he was renting a room at in the Lower East Side. And, he was a nice guy, but he thought that Frank was trying to shoot on him, and he wasn't having it, and rightfully so. But Frank was nuts for that whole deal. to end it on a better note, right? The best Frank Iadevaia story was we have booked a show in Jersey, and I was telling you all these people would gravitate to these shows because nobody was really running anything at the time as far as independent shows went. And we would, you know, probably every other show, someone would, uh, come up and, hey, I'm interested in putting money into the show, and getting into the business. So Frank uh, was living with a woman in Jersey City, and three of these guys had thrown some money into the show. So a couple days before the show, we decided to have a booking meeting, and we're going to put together, a run sheet and what we're going to do and everything. And I tell these guys, they were out of New York. I tell them, I said, look, let's go. We'll have this meeting, and Frank is the creative force, because really he was, right. I mean, he was great with coming up with all that stuff. And we get there, and Frank, we're waiting for him in the kitchen, at the kitchen table, and there's four of us, and we're sitting around, and Frank comes in after a long day at work, and walks right into the kitchen and says, all right, here's what we're going to do, this Saturday. And as he's explaining to these guys how he's going to put this show together and the angles or the storylines that he's going to do, he starts kicking off his work boots. He takes off his shirt. He undoes his belt. He takes his jeans off, his socks off. He's standing there in his tighty whities, scratching his balls, conducting this booking meeting, and then puts on sweatpants and slippers and all this stuff, and then turns around and shakes these guys' hands goodbye. And I remember they called me that night, and they were like, they it took them a while. They left out of there in shock, but when they called me back later that evening, they said, that was the craziest thing they ever saw. This guy comes in and conducts a business meeting after work, and he starts taking his clothes off and changes his clothes in front of them at the table as we're having the meeting. I mean, that was a good crazy story from Frank. Yes, there's lots and lots and lots of other stories, but I'm not sure if the statute of limitations is expired on a lot of the things they're about, so I'm not really going to. No, we never did anything criminal. I never did anything criminal with Frank, and but he was he was out of his mind, man. He was out of his mind. And that was his personality. And you know what? From that business, as crazy as that business is, that crazy personality and the fact that he did all these really crazy things would be uh, one of the real factors in his advancement in that business, because that was really his personality. People gravitated to him because he was known as being a complete lunatic, uh, you know, uh, all day long, and a lot of people found it humorous. Uh, a lot of people thought they could make money off of it. I remember when he went on the Howard Stern show, and you know, he had phone calls from people who wanted to represent him. He had an offer to go to perform in Japan because of that. I mean, that's just the nature of that business, and on that level, it can be a sick business. Well, I guess we're finding out these days that there's a lot of people with sick minds, even if a lot of the stuff that's been said recently, uh, and in my opinion, 90% of it's not true about McMahon. But I don't believe most of what these people have said ever occurred. But Frank was such a crazy guy, and look, what would have happened to him had he lived? I think Frank Iadevaia would have wound up like a Gigi Allen type guy, because whenever you have someone who does things that are so extreme like that, they have to keep topping what they're doing. They have to go to the next extreme and the next level of craziness. They have to keep building it up um, to be able to keep the interest of their audience. And there's a saying in that business: if you get one fan, you've had a good match. If you get 10 fans, you're a wrestler. If you get 100 fans, you're a professional. And if you get 1,000 fans, you made something in the business. Frank uh, had a following, but those people followed him for the wrong reasons. And I do get conflicted about my experiences with Frank. I mean, we were, together 4 or 5 days a week sometimes. And, but I will say this about Frank is he took nothing. He came from nothing and made something. And his sheer determination and his desire. Wrestling was Frank's entire life. That's what he loved. That's all he ever wanted to do, was be a part of that business, and he was able to get pretty far in it. Considering this is somebody who grew up dirt poor and you know was not the biggest guy. Um, didn't have a body. I mean, he was able to carve out a name for himself in that business, and was known for the creative stuff that he did in that business. Uh, the world over, and he really was. So, but Frank Iadevaia was the type of person that he had younger friends, and when those friends grew up and became mature, they walked away from him, either because of the ridiculous nature of the things he was doing, or the fact that they just felt it was a little too much of a risk, a little too dangerous to be hanging around uh, with Frank. But no, I mean, he was very similar, in my opinion, to Paul Heyman, as far as uh, doing the Memphis style wrestling up in the Northeast, and as far as being able to spot talent. A lot of the talent that Heyman took on in the early ECW days had had come through the shows that Frank and I promoted out there, and a lot of these guys, they were just you know green as goose shit out of some of the gyms and the clubs, and hadn't even had their first match at that point. And but Frank would go look at the talent, and I would go with him. um, no one had cameras uh, back then, and then handy cams or what have you. Those things were incredibly expensive, and then furthermore, at that time, the business, if you brought a camera into one of these clubs, they're likely to shove it down your throat. So Frank and I would go and look, but Frank had an eye. He could watch a guy, and he would walk right up to him and say, "Hey, listen, if you want to have your first match." And I saw him do that with a lot of guys, and a lot of guys definitely got their break, for better or for worse, in the business, because Frank, saw something in them. So he had that ability. Um, he knew what looked good and what the fans wanted. So he was very good in that